Have you driven 141 miles an hour recently? Hopefully not. None of us need to be anywhere that quickly. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Welcome to our SEC show, officially the SEC live show that we deliver each and every Tuesday at noon Eastern time. I'm excited to be here. This is about the time I start to regardless of what time I get up, even if it's at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's typically not quite that early. I'm around the 9 a.m. hour, especially considering when I go to bed typically. But 9 a.m. is typically a good time to get up for me. Still kind of working through things mentally and emotionally, physically, not so much emotionally. I think I'm pretty pretty stable throughout the day there. But there we go. See, mentally not always working through all that throughout the morning. So it is officially the afternoon. Therefore, it is officially time for me to wake up, be here, and be ready to take your comments and questions. We have left the link in the live chat. Please join us here at the Voice of College Football. We have left that link for a number of our media contacts as well on Twitter. So hopefully some of them will stop by to talk SEC football with us and whatever's on their mind, whatever's on your mind. So if you have joined any of our call-in shows in the past, you know what the deal is, that I come with an amount of information, of course, and insight, and will continue to talk and talk and talk and talk. However, this works the best when you give me a call because you ultimately produce the show, all of you out there. But we'll talk some SEC football, and I will start out with the unfortunate story here that has caused a suspension in Alabama camp, and the Crimson Tide just went to camp this week. So we sit here on a Tuesday, and a number of SEC teams, I've got the list in front of me, but it's kind of convoluted, so I don't want to waste anyone's time searching through this list that I have of spring practice start dates for everyone in the SEC, and then also the spring games, which start April 8th would be the first. Okay, Mizzou, I forgot about you. I'm sorry. Mizzou actually had their spring game last Saturday, March 18th. Mizzou's special. Mizzou's different. Some people don't even consider them a full member of the SEC. Of course they are. They are technically a full member of the SEC, but they're kind of hanging out there on the northwest corner, and it's sometimes easy to forget about the Missouri Tigers, but they've got a 5-quarterback competition that we discussed last week. To some degree, 5 quarterbacks in camp could win the job for Mizzou, but they had their spring game this past Saturday. A couple of those quarterbacks could not participate, but of course, Brady Cook, and this is a 5-quarterback competition without needing a new quarterback, meaning their incumbent, Brady Cook, 14 touchdowns, 7 picks last year, is back, but he has not secured the job. But take Mizzou out of the mix. The second SEC spring game will be in a couple weeks on a Saturday, April 8th at Auburn. And then here at the Voice of College Football, once April 1st starts, April 1st is a Saturday, you will see a bevy, a blur, just an abundance of spring game coverage every Saturday, most of them on Saturdays. Florida, another outlier on a Thursday night. That'll be a whole lot of fun to take in the Florida spring game on a Thursday. And we will, of course, provide coverage of that. But every day on Saturday, every week on Saturday throughout the month of April, we will be here. Michigan sits alone as the only Power 5, and I believe the only school possibly in the FBS with a spring game on April 1st, and then it really kicks into gear on April 8th, and we will do our best, of course, to cover it all right here at the Voice of College Football, starting with the Michigan spring game. And I'm sorry, SEC fans, I'm using some bad words here, talking about other teams and other conferences, especially the Big Ten, your financial rival, your power rival. But Michigan is the first spring game in the month of April. And we are doing a Michigan watch party that everyone can take part in, even though we're doing it on our paid platform of Patreon. We are going to provide the link all over the various platforms here at the Voice of College Football. And I appreciate today we are simulcasting our SEC live show, formerly the SEC live show, out for all of you on all the various SEC channels. So understand that if you're on, let's say, the LSU channel and you enjoy coverage of other SEC teams, that we've got the main channel and we've got SEC channels, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia in the Eastern Division. And then in the Western Division, we've got Alabama, LSU, Auburn, and Texas A&M. And yes, those four. So we've got 7 covered in the SEC with specific channels. Then everything else that we provide concerning the SEC that you can find right here on the main channel. And then also we've got an SEC channel with almost 20,000 subscribers. So thank you for that, and lock it in on the SEC channel. I know that even though we've got 20,000 subs there, a number of you are not familiar with the SEC channel. So check that out. We provide coverage all over the conference. Okay. On to 141 miles per hour. In the chat, let me know the fastest you've ever driven. And then if that is abundantly fast, let me know that if that was possibly on like a racetrack. So my dad worked for Goodyear, and one year he was visiting the city of Indianapolis. He was doing business there, and they allowed him, they wanted him, they invited him to drive a pace car. And so he tested out a pace car, new tires, and one of the Oldsmobiles I think they had at the time. I don't know what they drive for a pace car now, but this, we're talking about 35, 40 years ago, that he drove a pace car at the Indianapolis 500, and just, it was a fun experience, of course. So under those conditions, maybe the miles per hour acceptable would be much different. But you can leave there in the live chat, what is the fastest you've ever driven, whether that was on a private road, which I would think would be a fairly rare occurrence, or, of course, out on the open highway. And I've done a few speeds at times that I did not necessarily, looking back on it, was not necessarily the best choice. All right. But when it comes to, and we will read off your entries. So Alabama defensive back Tony Mitchell has been suspended. I'm reading this from ESPN. Suspended Alabama defensive back Tony Mitchell was driving 141 miles per hour as he attempted to flee police. Well, that makes it a bit different as well. I didn't know anything about this story, except I had seen this earlier, but had not read the story. So we're all learning this together, or maybe you already have seen it. Attempted to flee police in Florida last week before being arrested, according to an arrest report obtained by AL.com. Mitchell and a passenger in his vehicle, Christopher Lewis, I guess that's pronounced Christopher, it's not Christopher, were arrested Wednesday by deputies from the Holmes County, Florida Sheriff's Office and charged with possession of marijuana with intent to sell and or deliver. Lewis also was charged with carrying a concealed firearm without a permit. Ooh, a lot going on there. Oh boy. Okay. I would like to know if, and maybe we'll find this out later in the story, if he was being chased because of the known or suspected possession of the marijuana, or because of the known situation carrying the concealed firearm without a permit, or if it was speeding that led to it and then he was speeding further, because it would be extremely stupid for him to be fleeing police regardless, but fleeing police and knowing that these would be the issues, that they knew about the issues, and that's why they were on the chase, because it's not going to end well, folks. It's not going to end well. Actually, unless there was some kind of accident, he basically, this ended about as well, at least in the moment, it ended about as well as it possibly could. At least he didn't hit someone, another car, or a tree, or a telephone pole. Alabama coach Nick Saban said Monday that Mitchell was suspended from the team and all team activities until we gather more information about the situation and what his legal circumstance is. Well, based on what we just read, it's pretty serious. I don't know if he would be playing football for me for at least a year. According to the arrest report, which was published by AL.com after Saban's announcement Monday night, deputies recovered 226 grams of marijuana, just under 8 ounces, and more than $7,000 in cash from the vehicle. That's kind of my low bar on how much money I would like to carry with me. I'm usually well above into the 5 digits, but $7,000 cash, pretty routine for me to be carrying in my vehicle with me. So no, nothing really to be suspicious about there. Police initially pursued Mitchell after observing him driving 78 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. I don't know anything about this individual, of course, other than he acted extremely stupid and probably extremely stupid before this, because obviously there were a number of things that led up to this. This wasn't just like in the moment stupidity and carelessness and recklessness. This was predetermined stupidity and recklessness and lawlessness before that. So there are levels of lawlessness and stupidity and ignorance and recklessness. He probably wasn't raised very well. Probably. Because any one of those things are stupid. The marijuana, the intent to sell or deliver, the reckless driving, of course, maybe at the top of the list. And then I am all for the Second Amendment. So let me clarify that. However, of course, you have to abide by the law. So a lot of things stacked on top of one another here. My goodness. And then, but then there are, and we all know this from reading these type of accounts a number of times, and then things that are even more serious, although this is pretty serious. There's a lot going on here, that criminals are typically morons. They're typically stupid in addition to it. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily their intelligence. They may be more intelligent than I am, but I'm talking about in regards to their wisdom. So obviously being a criminal typically shows that you have no wisdom to begin with. Therefore, you're not going to use any wisdom in trying to protect your crimes. So criminals usually give themselves away. So this moron here was driving 78 in a 55. So bam, there you go. Mitchell's black Dodge Challenger then accelerated to a high rate of speed and eventually was clocked at 141 before police lost a visual of the vehicle. Well, I guess you would. Man, when I'm driving my typical 75 and somebody goes by me at 90, it seems like they're probably going 90, but it doesn't take long for them to out of sight. Mitchell and Lewis were stopped 7 minutes later at a nearby location where police smelled the odor of burnt marijuana coming from within the vehicle, according to the report. Mitchell admitted to fleeing police and said that police had told him to punch it. All right. Police noted in the report that Mitchell's eyes were red and glazy, and that he appeared to have a slow and or delayed response answering questions. This all coming from the ESPN article that I'm reading. And if you want to talk football, of course, you can call the show. We've left the link in the chat. Police also recovered a loaded firearm, a Springfield 9mm from the vehicle, according to the report. Mitchell, who had a concealed weapons permit, and Lewis, who did not have a permit, both denied possession of the marijuana and the firearm. This is also leading me to the point of remembering why I didn't like covering news. And when I was a sports director, also did not like covering the news side of sports. I got into sports for a reason, not to be following police reports, but I had to do that from time to time. Mitchell, a freshman, is a former 4-star prospect and ESPN 100 player. The Crimson Tide opened their spring practice Monday Everybody's got an opportunity to make choices and decisions. Saban said there's no such thing to being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, I agree with his sentiment there. There is such a thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There are honest people with good intentions who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I get his point. Most of the time, it's fully on the individual. You've got to be responsible for who you're with, who you're around, and what you do, who you associate yourself with, and the situations that you put yourself in. I would actually state that the passenger in the vehicle, that the other person in the vehicle may want to consider those things as well. It is what it is, but there is cause and effect when you make choices and decisions that put you in bad situations. And there's a lot of them there. That goes well beyond what we've read recently and what has been reported and substantiated, confirmed with the Georgia players situation. There have been a total of 5 of them. I believe that's the number, 5 of them that have been drag racing. Okay, this is totally added on to in addition to that. Okay. Good news to start the day. We also understand that Alabama will be without one of their best players during the spring. Now, this is nothing that's uncommon. Again, we mentioned that Alabama opened practice on Monday without star edge rusher Dallas Turner and reserve linebacker Deontay Lawson. And I was looking at the Alabama linebacker situation earlier today and kind of running through. They've got a lot of decisions to make, a lot of young players in play for including the Georgia transfer Tesman Marshall, who could add depth and also be a starter in the Alabama linebacker corps. But much to decide concerning the Alabama linebackers, and also a JUCO transfer that they brought in as well. Can't remember his name right this second, but Dallas Turner is an exceptional player who I believe had a much better season 2021, his freshman season. That was the guy that if you were watching for Will Anderson, and Will Anderson, of course, had a monster season in 2021, but when he was not making the plays, it was sometimes because there was single coverage to negate the double team on the other side of Will Anderson, and sometimes the triple team. And Dallas Turner took advantage of that and made a ton of plays this past season. Not as much of a marquee season for Dallas Turner, but still an obvious player on that team that they will want to get mended up and healed up during the spring. Appreciate you all being here on the SEC live show. And we will look through your comments and questions. More so, we would love if you called the show. We will leave the link back in the live chat. You may be watching on the main channel. We are also simulcasting on the Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, SEC channels as well, also Texas A&M. So if any of those intrigue you, or you are a fan or interested in any of those teams, and also if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football and you support what we do, also keep in mind that we've got a number of channels that are under 1,000 subs. And if you know anything about YouTube, you know that they take you seriously once you hit 1,000, push your videos into traffic, and help you grow the channel. So we would like to get all of our channels up to 1,000 subs, particularly those ones that are close, including Texas A&M, South Carolina, within range to a certain extent. So South Carolina, Texas A&M, we would like to get to 1,000, and others, West Virginia. Again, whether you're a West Virginia fan or not, if you support what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please subscribe to the West Virginia channel. We would like to get that to 1,000. Georgia is awfully close to 1,000, around 850. So please subscribe to the Georgia channel again. And if you really could care less about those teams, or could not care less, let's get that straight, could not care less about those teams, or even hate and despise those teams, Florida fans, but you see the greater good, the greater cause, you catch the vision, then help us here at the Voice of College Football and subscribe to those teams that you hate. And then once we get past 1,000 and we're safely above 1,000 subscribers, then unsubscribe and do it with complete anger and detest and say good riddance. But you can help us out by subscribing, getting us past 1,000 on any and all the channels. And the focus right now is West Virginia, Georgia. Those are close at around 850. So we would appreciate that. Felipe says, I never want to hear a coach say, we turn kids into a man. That always got me. Coaches are there to coach a football team. There's coaches who genuinely care about players, but Saban and Smart. Okay. Well, Felipe, I would say that we acknowledge your opinion. There is nothing about Kirby Smart or Nick Saban. There are things that they've said and done that would lead me to believe that they care about their players, but I would not vouch for them. I'm not involved in all of their decisions. I believe they got into football coaching because they love football. That's my guess, that most football coaches get into coaching not because they want to improve young men. I'm not saying that this is for every coach out there, but I believe their number one priority or goal or ambition in life was to coach football because they love football. Now, we do know, for any of you who have grown to some level of maturity throughout your life, whether you're 20 or 25 or 55 or 80 out there, you understand that if this is working in your life the right way, you're smarter, wiser. I don't mean more intelligent, but you are wiser as you get older and your priorities change. So a coach can get into football coaching at the age of 25 and then a little bit later down the line determine that, yes, I still love football. I still love coaching, but it's more about them. And I truly want to help these individuals. I realized that doing what we do here, my incentive to do this, in addition to paying bills and building wealth and doing all those things that we all want to do as whether individuals or heads of households, that we want to secure our futures and also enjoy our lives financially and do all those things. In addition to that, the incentive continues to change and be more thinking about people out there, to be thinking about all of you, as I get a phone call right now that I will return in about 90 minutes. So I hope that makes sense. I'm not going to get into some kind of social or spiritual speech right now, but my incentive to do this changes, and what I would like to impact changes and is less selfless. It is more selfless and less selfish all the time. And so I have no issue with a coach who says, shoot, at this stage of my career, I'm 30 years into this, let's say, my ambition is to help young men. And again, unless something is proven otherwise to me, I've got to take them at their word. Roger Dodger states here, nice money. Yes and no. Yes and no. So for particular coaches who get into the coaching profession that have a certain advantage, and usually that advantage is based on their own playing status. So great players, usually Deion Sanders, or if they've built some kind of media platform that has just substantiated what they've done as a player, Trent Dilfer. Okay, so what they've done is, outside of coaching, they have proven to be great football minds or capable football minds, whether that's as a media analyst or as a player. Okay. So they go into the coaching ranks at a higher level than most do. But when you talk about Nick Saban, when you talk about Kirby Smart, I would like to see their salaries for their first several years of coaching. So when somebody says that that coaches get into the coaching profession for the money, in this day and age, that could be true to a certain extent, but you must really believe in your ability to climb the ranks. Take any, I think of guys like PJ Fleck. What was he making when he first started? Now, he actually was an NFL wide receiver for a short period of time. So I got to think that that helped him get in. And I don't remember before Western Michigan where he was, but most coaches make next to nothing when they first start. So again, they must really like it, really enjoy it. And maybe they've got a ton of confidence in themselves. And I'm sure they do. Most of them rise through the ranks because there is a huge level of confidence there that you may call ego that is obvious. You cannot succeed to the level of a Nick Saban or Kirby Smart and not have an ego and not have a ton of self-confidence and not believe that what you say means something and that you have a lot of value. All right. Did not think we would go in the direction of evaluating coaching incentives, but yeah, I would love to know. I would like to see a salary progression for every major college football coach because most of them made like next to nothing when they started. And for some of them, the climb is slow. And for some of them, the climb is accelerated. Dan Beast Media chimes in. Our buddy Randy. Thank you for the information here. We got Kirby Smart earned $8,000 in his first year coaching at Valdosta State. Now, let's understand that $8,000 when Kirby Smart earned it was not a lot of money, but it was more than it is certainly right now. I like to do that from time to time. I like to compare what salaries or whatever the category, just the price of something, the value of something, let's say in 1980 versus now. So what year was that? Dan Beast Media, can you tell us what year that was? Because my first full-time job, I had a job through high school and college, but my first full-time job, I made $12,000 a year. Okay, Dan Beast Media says in 2000. So in 1991, I made like 12.5. So let's go to the what is that called? It's the inflation calculator. So in the year 2000, where is this? Okay. $8,000 in the year 2000. This only goes to 2022, but I think we get the point. It should be very close. So he was making $14,000 a year. If this were today, that would be $14,000. 13,986. Now that's a inflation calculator dealing with products. I think it would be about the same. I've got to think it's dealing with inflation, so that should be. I'm curious to see. With a little overtime. Well, let's not do overtime. I think I made 12.8 in 1991. So that's only $28,000. So $28,000 is not. I don't believe it's enough money to live on in the year 2022, 23. But yeah. All right. Other news as I was going through notes from the SEC, there's a number of things out there. Again, Alabama at practice, Georgia at practice, LSU. There were a few things worth noting here. The LSU defensive backfield is going to be key to them winning the West. Absolutely going to be key to them winning the West. They lost pretty much everyone out of the secondary who was starting, and they bring in some transfers, meaning Syracuse transfer Darian Chestnut, Ohio State transfer J.K. Johnson, and the big one that they are counting on heavily would be Denver Harris, the former five-star at Texas A&M. So LSU, a lot of people have high hopes for LSU, but I do think that they've got some things to work out. Their defense was better last year, probably as good as they were down the stretch of 2019. It wasn't a dominant defense that they put on the field in 2019 and winning a national championship, but they were pretty darn good down the stretch. They got better and better as the season went on. And then they were just, by LSU standards, a horrible defense in 21 and 22. And now they look to be better. So they've got to be better, I believe, on defense. Of course, their defensive effort this past season was good enough to squeak out a division championship. But that LSU team that won the SEC Western Division is the worst SEC Western Division champion since when? It's been a long time. Now, when I was down covering the SEC firsthand, up close on the sidelines, in the press box, in the news conferences, all that, because I make that distinction because I consider myself covering the SEC right now. But of course, I do it from a million miles away. But doing it firsthand in the late 1990s into 2000, that it's strange to think back because the division wasn't that strong then. Alabama popped up with some good teams, 1996, 1999. There were some marginal teams like Mississippi State in 98 that won the SEC West. They almost won it in 99. Arkansas was pretty good under Houston Nutt. They had a really good 1998 season. LSU was down that entire time. They were struggling to get to bowl games. Auburn, during the time that I was there in the mid to late 90s, they were good. They weren't exceptional. They went to the SEC title game in 97. They were typically in that 8-3 range, but not extremely good. So the SEC West, it was really around the time that Nick Saban lifted Alabama that the other teams elevated. Of course, LSU with Nick Saban prior to that. But this has to be the worst team that's won an SEC Western Division. And I credit Brian Kelly, did an exceptional job. I did not expect them to win the division, but with 4 losses total, this is the weakest team that we've seen win that division, which has been the best in college football. Man, I got to go back a long ways. Probably pre-Saban LSU. Probably that Mississippi State team in 98 or Alabama 99. One of those teams would be the worst that have won SEC Western divisions. All right, we are going to stay in the SEC Western Division and talk about one of those schools I just mentioned that I used to cover pretty close and up front, but it's been a long, long time. But I was talking about the SEC Western Division, and this being this LSU team accomplishing much in being able to elevate to that status under Brian Kelly for the first year, but 4-loss SEC Western Division champions. That doesn't happen very often. We got Kyle Loomis on the line from E2C Network to break down some Auburn football for us. Kyle, how you doing today?
Doing well. Let me just say this about the LSU Tigers. It doesn't matter how often or how quickly they go down in a season, they quickly rise back up to the cream of the crop. Even as you said, when they had, a season with a lot of losses that you wouldn't expect someone competing in the SEC championship game to have, they just find a way to reload and retool real quick. And I guess that really helps when you make a great hire, at least seemingly great hire like Brian Kelly.
This has been a division for quite some time that Alabama would get penciled in with very, very strong pencil lead, practically ink. as the division champion, the favorite leading into it. They probably still are going into it, but LSU um, is right there. And a lot of people like LSU to repeat as champions. But there are vulnerabilities there that, and I don't want to necessarily hoist Auburn into the discussion for the division championship, but I do see a lot of parity in the division from top to bottom that hasn't always existed.
Yeah, I would definitely not put us in that conversation for now. Much like LSU, Auburn, and you and I have discussed this on a few other live streams before, how quickly Auburn's able to rebound sometimes too. However, we have not seen a decision in a head coach bring this program down to a level that it has in quite some time. So I wouldn't expect an Auburn team this year, from what we know right now, to be a major factor in the SEC championship. Although I would love to be wrong about that. It does seem like Alabama, pains me to say it, is always the one you pencil in there. And but the great thing is that, as you addressed, there is a little bit of parity that continues to rise to the top there and make this a little bit more interesting in the SEC West than you think it should be. I'd love for Auburn to be in that mix. I just don't know that it's going to happen this year.
I was running through some notes that I had gathered concerning the SEC, but don't believe I've got anything with Auburn in particular today. If I remember correctly, Kyle, from our previous conversations, of course, other than Mizzou, who is the real outlier, they already played a spring game this past Saturday, so they got that out of the way.
Wow.
Auburn will be the next SEC team to hit the field for a spring game on April 8th. Therefore, of course, they started a bit sooner than everyone else outside of Mizzou. But they had a week off during that time, correct, for spring break?
Yes, they did take that week off for spring break. And so this is a little bit longer of a spring practice schedule than we're used to because of that. But also, I think, Coach Hugh Freeze wanted to stretch it out a little bit more to keep these guys in that regiment, in that way of doing things, those type of schedules that you get into when you're, in spring practice and stuff like that. The more you could do that, the more he could kind of get these guys headed in the right direction, because a lot of these guys are coming from, I won't say like bad coaching or bad styles of doing things, just different, right? You got a new regime coming in. There's a different way of doing things. So the longer that you can keep these guys in together and doing those type of things together, then maybe you'll get a little bit more synergy a little bit more quickly. I see the question down there, and I had some notes as well that I knew people would want to discuss today. Thoughts about Cam Newton participating at Auburn's Pro Day and trying to recapture that national title magic. So yeah, for those of you that may or may not be aware, today is Auburn's Pro Day. And obviously everybody, I think majority of all the big programs have a pro day where they showcase their talent. Auburn's obviously showing a lot of their current seniors and people recently graduated that want to get a look on NFL scouts. The big news of the day, Cam Newton is in town throwing with the other quarterbacks out there, trying to maybe recapture not just national title feelings and magic for the Auburn football team, having him there, but maybe a little bit of magic for himself. I honestly was shocked. Not that Cam Newton's a stranger to coming back to Auburn. A lot of people say that, Cam Newton, just used Auburn to get to the next level. Well, it's pretty strange that he came back for his degree, that he came back so many times to be part of, events and things like that. Been at basketball games, been at football games, not just as a guy on the sideline, but up in the stands with fans and things like that. So it's good to have Cam back. It definitely creates a lot of hype.
I didn't know anything about that until last night, and boom, on social media, boom, right in my face. Cam Newton posting a video where he's tossing the ball around the indoor practice facility, and yes, talking about more focused on, and it's completely understandable. Hey, he draws attention to the Auburn Pro Day. He does a lot of good things, well, that Kyle outlined, but if this is isolated in and of itself, this is still a good thing to draw attention to the Auburn football program. Then it obviously serves him as well. He wants to showcase his skills for the NFL and get back into the league. He did not play last season for the first time during his NFL career, and he wants to get back on the field and believes that he is one of the top 32 to play the sport, the position on this planet, and stated as such and said, I want to show myself and my skills. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think if you just look at what we know about Cam, then you can make that argument that there's no way there are 32 quarterbacks in the NFL better than him. At least he would be 32nd, right? Somewhere in that mix, just based on his resume, what we know about him. What we don't know is how he's kept in shape, how he's stayed up to date on what he needs to skill wise to be able to make that a true statement. We'll find out a little bit of that today, I'm sure. My hope is that Cam can kind of have a little bit of a final rejuvenation of his NFL career, because he is really Auburn's big NFL quarterback prospect that we have to kind of point to and show people, hey, you can come to Auburn, play quarterback, and have success at the NFL. I mean, he was a NFL Rookie of the Year, NFL MVP, made it to the Super Bowl. Didn't have a great Super Bowl, but that's besides the point. So yes, for himself, this is obviously a great thing, and I'm hoping the best for him. But as you said, for kind of putting the focus back on Auburn football currently, new recruiting, a new facility, it's going to help recruiting in itself. But when you've got these stars coming back to participate in things like this, it attracts a little bit more attention. And my understanding is there's a few high profile and just other recruits kind of coming in and out this week that, that's kind of piquing their interest a little bit to say, wow, we knew Cam Newton was part of this program, but he's still back here. He's still hanging out with them. He's still, invested in what it means to be part of the Auburn family. So it definitely brings up good feelings. And I love seeing whenever Cam can come back on campus.
Yeah, we could get into a debate about Cam Newton, certainly, not, and I'm talking about as a football player and how good he is right now. Of course, for the bulk of his career, he was a top 10, 15 quarterback in the league, whatever it was, and certainly one of the very best during an MVP season that you just noted in leading a team to a Super Bowl. Now, whether he's got that skill set now, certainly he's going on like 34 years old, and he also of course, had a poor season his last season in the NFL. But I can't believe, even at his worst, and that was pretty much what we saw his last season in the NFL, that maybe he's not a top 32, but for him to not be on a roster for an NFL team is just, I can't believe that his skills have diminished that much.
Yeah, it's shocking that he's not on a roster. That's probably the best way to approach this discussion. Is the fact that Cam Newton's not on a roster is interesting in and of itself. I think Cam has definitely, I don't know how to walk around this, but he's definitely changed the way he promotes himself and his style of himself over the years. And, maybe there's a little bit of, I don't want to say arrogance, but, overconfidence sometimes that comes with that. Maybe that plays against him a little bit. I don't know. There's got to be a reason why people don't, or at least this last season, didn't necessarily want him on the roster. But I hope the time off has definitely kind of refocused him and allowed enough of these I could call them programs, but teams in the NFL to take a little extra look and say, you know what, whether he starts or not, this guy's a talent. And if quarterbacks get as injured as much as they do in the NFL, why not put him on there? His time may be done in the NFL in terms of what we knew him as, but I still think he's got a little bit of juice left in there to make something special happen for a good ending to what is NFL career for Cam Newton.
Folks, as is the case across college football for a ton of programs, the quarterback battle and quarterback situation is front and center for Auburn. We've discussed this with Kyle a number of times and will in the future. I don't know that we can add much to our last few conversations, so we'll hit up Kyle on this one in future weeks, especially as we get into the transfer portal season and what may turn out to be Auburn's starting quarterback that is not even on campus right now. We shall see. I did want to hit you up, Kyle, on the running back situation before we let you go. Tank Bigsby, of course, moves on. And we've discussed his abilities and them not being fully realized because of offensive line issues. But Jarquez Hunter's a guy that I've seen play a ton of times. He's been integral to the offense. So he's in the mix. Of course, he had a nice season, 675, 7 touchdowns. Damari Alston also as well, and a USF transfer in Brian Batty.
Yeah. The room for running backs is going to be surprisingly exciting. You would think with the loss of Tank Bigsby that all the excitement would be sucked out of the room, because that man is just an absolute beast. And you're going to see that today, I think, at Auburn's Pro Day. Just a pure athlete. I hate to make this comparison, but maybe it's somewhat accurate. Feels a little bit like Derrick Henry maybe in the NFL right now in terms of body type and ability to just run people over, and probably with a little bit extra speed, that being for Tank Bigsby. Um, I think you're going to see a big hole left when he's gone. But I also think there's a lot of excitement there to be had, whether it's Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston. There's something about this kid when I watch him run that just excites me. Just a little ball of fury, kind of, I guess, a little bit like Sean Shivers. If people remember that guy, he's famous for knocking the helmet off of the Alabama defensive back in that Iron Bowl, most recent Iron Bowl win. That's what he kind of reminds me of in a few short stints that we saw him last year. And yes, you brought up the USF transfer in Brian Body, I think is how it's pronounced, but I have gone back and forth on that myself and been corrected thousands of times. I probably still have it wrong, so no offense there. But I just think when you look at him, and 1,000-yard rusher there, Jarquez Hunter, we know what this kid can do. He can run it downhill and be tough, and also hit you on the edge with the speed, and what this kind of unknown factor of Damari Alston. I really think this is going to be an exciting position for Auburn this year, and that's what we're known for, right? Auburn is, got an argument for running back you. I know that kind of stirs some people up when you start those kind of conversations, but we do have an argument for that. I just point you to one Bo Jackson.
Yeah, and then we could continue the list. But yes, maybe not currently, but it depends on your context for those position arguments. That's always my next response when somebody wants to tab a particular school as wide receiver you,
Right.
tight end you, whatever. I always say, okay, are we talking all time? We talking currently? We talking the last 20 years? What are we talking about? So yes, Auburn historically certainly has a good argument. Kyle Loomis, E2C Network. Kyle, is there anything in particular that you want to point people to in addition to just getting on over to E2C Network? Any particular videos or live streams or anything that you have on deck?
We do every Wednesday night a Auburn family live stream where it's a call-in show where we literally you set the stage. So, and it's open to anybody, but we just call it Auburn Family Night, and you can hit the call-in link there and call into the show and talk similar to what we're doing here on or off camera. That's the one I always kind of point people towards because literally it's about anything, sports or not. Usually we talk a lot about sports. That's the big thing. I would say on the channel right now, obviously with basketball now ending for Auburn on both sides of the equation, men and women. And even though baseball is going right now, we're going to be still for the next month putting heavily into some spring practice stuff. So if you are a football only person, this is definitely a time to kind of get re-engaged over at E2C Network because there's more news starting to come out, less rumors, more facts and stuff like that as we get up towards that A-Day game, which I think is going to be very exciting in and of itself to watch because of the new format that may or may not happen there.
Kyle Loomis, E2C Network. Kyle, we always appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much. War Eagle.
All right. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got, Kevin McGuffey's here. Look at this. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Mark. How you doing today? Good to be back on with you.
I am doing well, and I hate to bring it up and make the obvious transition from basketball to football, but your basketball season ended at the hands of Kansas State the other day.
Yes. It's not, I hate to say it's not totally surprising because Kansas State was a kind of school that gave Kentucky fits this year. The 4-guard offense, quick guards. At the end of the game, they made their shots. Kentucky didn't, and it's another sad end here here in Lexington for basketball. But we'll move on to football. And like I said, Calipari has the number 1 recruiting class coming in next year. When that has happened, he's done some pretty good things. I think I think Kentucky needs an Elite 8 Final Four kind of run next year because the vultures are circling a little bit, especially if you get on the message boards and where of course we know everyone is totally rational and all of that. But yeah, it was a disappointing season, or disappointing finish. But I can't say that I was surprised that Kansas State beat them.
Kevin McGuffey's here from Last Word on College Football. Head on over to Last Word. Check out the latest on college football and your favorite team. So we know that Kentucky is the one the one outlier, they don't want to play a spring game. They're not going to play a spring game, so no spring game for
Right.
Kentucky Blue. But of course, they're still hard at work, just like everybody else.
Right.
Have we gathered anything from Kentucky's workouts?
Yeah, just to go back on your point, the reason Kentucky's not having a game this year is because they're installing a new field, new turf at Kroger Field. So they're doing that. So what they're going to do on April 1st, they're going to have kind of an open practice / fan day where at least people can come and watch the team practice, meet the players, that kind of thing. So they at least are going to have that. But yes, no, there's no spring game again this year for the third time in 4 years. Obviously, the other two were due to COVID, but that's where we are with that. And as far as practice, they actually last week was Kentucky spring break, so they had kind of a week off, and they just got back to the practice field today, and so and some of the media was allowed to check things out, and of course we're all unlike the previous at Auburn, Kentucky. A quarterback is one place where there's not really a question mark right now. It's pretty much Devin Leary. So by all accounts, he seems healthy, recovered from that torn pectoral muscle from last year. He's just getting used to the Liam Cohen offense, getting used to running a pro style offense, and getting used to taking snaps under center. Because if you go back and watch the games at North Carolina State, they didn't do that a whole lot. So that's been an adjustment. But like I said, by all accounts, things are progressing quite well so far.
Our buddy Joey Foster is reminding everyone that you can just take the link from the video right now, the live stream, and share it on your social media accounts and bring in some more folks to talk SEC football with us. Got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football, and we've addressed this at another time during the off season. But I think, number one, people would be a little bit surprised if they looked at the line of Kentucky wide receivers through the years. It's been a bit more impressive than what the program has been given credit for in terms of producing some really good players for the NFL. But in particular, this group could turn out to be the best of the bunch. Not just individually, there have been outstanding guys, but as a group, this wide receiver room has the potential to be outstanding.
Oh, absolutely. And just shameless plug here, the most recent post I did for Last Word that went up late last week was looking at the wide receivers and the tight ends. And that's another group that I think Kentucky can get some big production from this year. They were used really well with Cohen's offense 2 years ago, not so much last year with Scangarello. But to your point, yes, you talk about Dane Key, Berrien Brown, Tavion Robinson returning for another year. Just those three guys right there. I mean, Brown was a freshman All-American. Big things. Big things are expected, I think, from this offense. Cole Kublik, I think, from the SEC Network had posted something yesterday that I didn't get to watch the video, but basically intimating that Kentucky's offense is definitely one to watch in 2023. And I see no reason to disagree with that, partially because of those receivers. And then you throw in the tight ends with Caddis, Brendan Bates returning for another year, Isaiah Cummings. Basically Kentucky's top 5 receivers return from last year. So that's you throw in a healthy Devin Leary, you throw in the offense with Cohen, and Kentucky, obviously the Big Blue Nation is hoping Kentucky's going to run it back like they did in 2021 as far as offense goes, where they averaged about 33 points a game. So as you said, if you're looking at the numbers there, Brown had 50 receptions, and then also was great on kickoff returns last year. Dane Key with 37 led the team in touchdowns with 6. Robinson second on the team with 40 receptions. So, and you have to remember that's playing, with a not quite as exciting offense as last year, and with Will Levis literally running for his life every game, it seemed like. So, like I said, the pieces are there. Like I said, it's very very exciting to see what's going to happen. I wish there was going to be a spring game just to kind of see, like a control, whether it's a controlled scrimmage, whatever. But like I said, I keep harping on it, or not harping on it, but I just keep saying it, that I'm really, really excited to see what this team's going to look like on the offensive side in 2023.
Hey, Kevin, when the 12-team college football playoff format was announced, of course, there was a lot of banter back and forth about what it would look like. And then they threw out the proposal, and then it took about another year for them to confirm it. So we know what this is going to look like in 2024 going forward. Are Kentucky fans, does that give a level of hope as opposed to 4 teams? You got to get through Georgia, you got to get through Alabama or whoever else. This league's too tough. You got to be one of the 4, versus we're in a situation now where, hey, 12 teams, you could be the 3rd or 4th best team in the SEC and make the playoffs.
Well, I think you could throw the case out there that Kentucky, hope is probably the eternal motto for the Kentucky football program over the years. I think, maybe there's not a whole lot of talk that I've seen, but I think you could make the case that, certainly in 2018, Kentucky could have been, that team probably could have and should have been in a 12-team playoff. They might have been that 12th team. The team 2 years ago would have been right on the fringe of that as well. The most recent 10-win team. I think it's something to give everyone, and not just Kentucky, but I think it's something to get everybody, hope for the future, that you could get in that 12-team playoff. And of course, I'm, as some of you know or may not know, for Last Word, I also do bowl projections, and I'm also interested to see how that 12-team playoff is going to affect. Are they going to use, what bowls are they going to use? Like for those, are they going to use those for the playoff games? How many of these like fringe bowls will go away? Kind of something like that. But yes, I think, like I said, for Kentucky and just about anybody, I think that 12-team playoff gives a definite glimmer of hope that you're not just trying to get that top 4. You just assume it's going to be like, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and then like a Clemson or, somebody else like a USC, somebody who busts up, 1 year and has a really incredible year. And, now there's 8 other slots, So, Stoops' motto has always been, why not Kentucky? So, just throw that in right now. Why not Kentucky? Why not the playoffs? But like I said, we'll see what happens when that takes part next year.
There's a pretty incredible stat that if you take after the first year of the playoff, and then of course TCU, they broke this string last year as they won a game in the playoff, but for those 8 seasons in between, 8 years, you're talking 32 playoff teams. And obviously we know they're not 32 different playoff teams. There's about 6 of them,
Right.
but there was a string of 8 years there where the SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State won every playoff game, and none of them lost to anyone except for each other.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty. That's pretty nuts and pretty incredible stat, and just kind of shows that you have those 4 or 5 schools that have just been the top echelon, and then everyone else is trying to fight up that ladder. As you said, TCU got in, this year with the incredible season they had. USC was probably right there until they, could beat, basically couldn't beat Utah last year. And, of course, then they had that epic game with Tulane. But yeah, it's pretty incredible that, like you said, those few schools have just dominated the playoff and everything since it's been going on.
Have you put the bowl projections together yet?
No,
Okay.
I have thought about it. I thought about doing one. What I might do is wait till after the May, like the second transfer portal, after the secondary one, and then kind of see where all the rosters, play out. And then I'm definitely going to do one like at some point later this summer, maybe like May, June, and then I'll do one before the season, and we'll, keep rolling after that. But, I was going to say you just put Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and pick your fourth team. There's your playoff. There's your good place to start. Whether it's Clemson, whether it's USC, whether it's somebody like a TCU that jumps up that nobody's expecting. LSU could be a dark horse this year.
Texas.
Something like that. Yeah, or Texas, exactly. Or in Oklahoma, who knows? Yeah, no, I haven't. I've thought about it, but no, I haven't. I haven't tried to tackle that mountain yet. But that'll probably be like sometime late May, maybe early June. I definitely plan on putting something out. Just just for funds. This is just speculation, obviously. Which of course is what projections are. You're just speculating, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I've gotten some some good feedback about it. Some people are like, well, why did you put my team here? Why did you put they'll never go to that bowl. I'm like, well, it's just one person's opinion. So
Well, Kevin, I have fun with this one because let's consider that TCU made the college football playoff and they were 5-7 the year before.
right.
What 5-7 team? I'm not saying that this is going to happen, could happen, but it happened once. And actually, if you go just prior to the college football playoff, Auburn went from 3-9 to the BCS championship game in 2013. They had
Right.
an even more ridiculous climb from one season to another. So, I kind of like to play that game in terms of who could be the next TCU.
Right.
Texas
trying to-
A&M,
I
Miami both went 5-7 last year.
I think, like I said, I believe A&M is going to have a much better season. I'm trying to find the standings from last year just so I could go through real quick and
Well, the three
and
that
look-
come to mind for me, Texas A&M and Miami both went 5-7. Michigan State went 5-7 last year. They would be the most capable
right.
that I can come up with.
Right. Yeah. Now,
If you don't want to go strictly by 5-7
Mhm.
being the standard, just somebody who was down. Oklahoma, of course, was only
Mhm.
6-6 last year.
right, and of course Miami started off so well last year and then just faded at the end. I think they're probably due for a bounce back season. I think, like I said, I think Texas A&M. I mean, I think at this point they've got to do. I think they need a big year this year, or there's probably going to be some interesting times down there in College Station. But another team that I'm just going to throw her out there, not as maybe a playoff team, but Colorado, with Dion and all the players that they brought in, that he brought with them, and all the transfers that he's brought in. I think that's a team that maybe not this year, but maybe next year. I definitely think they're making a bowl game this year. I don't remember how long it's been since they've been to a bowl, but I definitely am going to have them in a game. I think they're a team that could make some noise this year too. So, but we still got 6 months before it gets going. So there's plenty of time. But like I said, those are three. I think Miami. I think Texas A&M. Michigan State. I always have the urge now. I want to put Michigan State in a bowl game with Kentucky, because for years we tried to match Iowa and Kentucky, and now we've seen that, and I hope we never see it again. After the Music City Bowl this year, Michigan State and Kentucky have kind of had this little what's the word? Kind of a rivalry that's not a rivalry, passive aggressive, kind of thing. Last year, 2 years ago, Mel Tucker left him off his top 25 ballot, at the end of the season. They've had a number of recruiting battles. Kentucky's won a lot of them. They tried to get Vince Marrow last year, made a huge offer to Coach Marrow. He decided to stay here. I think it would be awesome to try to match them up. And I'm just going to tell you, probably my first bowl projection, I'm probably going to figure out what game, and I'm going to put them together, and we'll see what happens after that. So I'm telling you that now. When you see it in like early June, you're going to see Kentucky and Michigan State playing in, I don't know, one of the Florida bowls, maybe. Maybe it's not the Outback Bowl anymore. I can't, Tampa Bay, whatever it's called now, but that's the one Florida game Kentucky hasn't played in the last 5 years. So let's get to Tampa this year.
I think it was the ReliaQuest Bowl last year, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right, because it's it's so there's so much
I'm much more comfortable with the Outback Bowl.
Yes,
I wish they would just state
yeah,
that.
one of my favorite memories ever was
Yeah.
in 99 when Kentucky with Tim Couch went to the Outback Bowl, and we got to go at the TV station. A shameless plug behind me here. I'm in a different room than I usually would be when I talk to you. We got to go and we spent a week in Tampa doing our news and all this stuff, and we got media passes for the bowl, and it was like the greatest. It was one of the greatest things I've ever got to experience as far as like media type thing. Of course, Kentucky lost. They played great in the first quarter, and then they kind of fell apart after that. But it was
So yeah, that was a game against Penn State, and I was
right.
thinking going through the Big Ten. So I'm glad you explained that Michigan State connection because I would not have come up with that. But yeah,
Gotcha.
Kentucky's started to make the rounds against the Big Ten. You've had Iowa a couple times, Northwestern, Penn State a couple times, Penn State
Yep.
recently in the Citrus Bowl. So there's been
Yep.
some games between Kentucky and the Big Ten, and maybe we can get them together with Michigan State. I'll root for that now that I know that that's a secret rivalry.
Yeah, it's low key, but it's there's definitely something there, and I would love to see them just play and be done with it. So, and I see the poster here. I mean, that's a possibility too. We'll see. We'll see what Coach Sanders can do with all the players that he's brought in. So, but
I'll say this, Kevin, that another fun exercise I like to go through is that there were 27 teams last year that either improved by 3 wins or declined by 3 wins from the previous season. So if you try to do the same thing, and that's just in the Power 5, and if you try to do that again this season and go through everybody's records and think, I got to find 27 teams that are either going to improve by that much or decline by that much. And then you put that out. Like if I would do that and I would just try to select 27 teams, then I would throw that out as being my predictions. People would call me crazy because they'd be like, there's no way that team was 6-6 last year. They're going to go 9-3 or whatever. But that might have been a slightly of an outlier of a year, but there are going to be about 20 teams that are going to have at least a big acceleration in wins or a big drop off. It happens every year. It's tough to find those teams because I think we tend to think that teams are going to just stay the same, but they don't.
Right. And as much as it pains me to say this, we'll see how they do from last year to this year. But you could also throw Tennessee in that mix, maybe. So after the team who maybe could take that next step and see what happens this year. We'll see obviously what happens with at quarterback and a couple of those other positions. But I mean, it pains me to say that, but there I said it, so I just got it out of my system. So I will admit I rooted for Tennessee this weekend against Duke because it was like, okay, Tennessee, Duke, Tennessee. Don't really like either one of them, but I'll go with the SEC. So I rooted for them. Now I'm done with it. So go in the NCAA tournament. So now we'll say go for it, Atlantic. So there you go.
Yeah, sometimes it's the lesser of two evils that you have to go with during these situations once your team gets knocked out. Yeah.
Right. So
Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football. Hey, Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on?
No, not like I said, I have the post up now, looking at the wide receivers. I'm working on one now that will go up hopefully tomorrow or Thursday with the offensive line. I'm just doing a spring preview, like kind of position by position. And then also on Friday, Kentucky's having their pro day with Will Levis. 11. There's 11 Wildcats participating. Levis, Jacquez Jones, Chris Rodriguez, Keydron Smith, DeAndre Square. I'm just kind of looking through the list here. That's going to be on the SEC network this year, as we're all interested to see where Levis is going to end up. I saw a thing with Mel Kiper this morning. He had him going third to the Colts. I saw another one a little while ago that had him with the Titans, like at the 11th pick, like dropping down some. So, but where everyone has picked up quarterbacks now. But anyway, that's something that's coming up. I'll have a recap of that up this weekend. That's going to be Friday. Like I said, it's going to be on the SEC network for anybody. If you have that, and you want to watch it, see the Kentucky players, and like I said, then the next weekend is the open practice for the fans. So that's we'll see. Everybody will get their chance to kind of see Levis, see that offense, see those wide receivers you were talking about. Everything, like I said, everything is progressing, seems to be progressing well, which is what everybody in the Big Blue Nation's wanting to hear. We want we want Leary healthy, wrong L there, and to see what kind of numbers he can put up this year. So
good stuff. All right, Kevin, appreciate you stopping by as always, sir. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having me on, and look forward to doing this again next week. So we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Kevin. Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football. Check out his work right there covering the Wildcats and the fine folks there at Last Word who have been so good to us through the years. So check out Last Word on college football. I want to remind everyone that we posted a live stream yesterday that dealt with a lot of upgrades here on the channel throughout the network. So please check it out. The core of it is basically that we've started YouTube memberships here on the main channel. So please check out those various levels of YouTube memberships and let me know if you've got any questions. Let's take a call. We got Dan Beast Media here to talk some college football. What's going on, man?
Yeah, I was going to see where you were going to take it there. If you were going to say Georgia football or college football or whatever it was.
Leave it up to you.
Well, the good news is we've got plenty to discuss. That's for sure. Just to follow up on your previous guest there, talking Kentucky. Last night, while I was watching the Big Ten show, they got into a discussion about Bob Stoops and what the possibilities were he might end up at Iowa someday and what it would take to leave Kentucky, given their natural ties. And Erica, who is a friend of the show, who calls in all the time, big Iowa fan, she was just asking a lot of questions about it. And I wasn't able to join the conversation, but I was monitoring the conversation. And if Erica catches this on a replay or something, I just wanted to point out that Stoops, first off, I don't know why he would leave Kentucky. I think Kentucky, he's already very well paid. And you may ask why, given where Kentucky finishes every year. But I think Darrell would back me up on this when I say that the fact that Stoops has elevated Kentucky to the point where they are, 8 wins, 7, 8 wins might be considered a down year at Kentucky, then he's earning all of that money in today's market, given what the market is today for coaches. So I don't know why he would ever leave. But if Ferentz were to leave Iowa and they were to actually be serious about a coaching search, Stoops would have to be on that list. And say he made that move to Iowa because, as Bear Bryant once said, mama called and he had to go home, then I just think that Iowa should know what they're getting. And that is that Stoops is a hard-nosed football coach who knows the game. He loves the game, and his teams play the game the right way. They are very physical. And every year when Georgia, like they do the exit interviews at the end of the year, you hear the same thing coming from Kirby about what his players said about the course of the season. And it may not always be the only game mentioned, but every year the Kentucky game is mentioned as one of the toughest, most physical games that Georgia plays. So I can't say it any better than the players say it. And you don't get that kind of toughness unless you have a coach that believes in it, practices it, and instills it in his players. So in this fantasy world of, some fantasy future, if Stoops were to go to Iowa, they would be fortunate to have him because that means they're getting a good coach who would instill the kind of toughness necessary that would play well in the Big Ten. And they would be at least as good as they've been over the last decade or better. And I honestly think he would absolutely have them. Well, I know they're going to lose divisions, but he would have them competing or in the conversation for making an appearance, in a championship game. Now, could they do it every year at Iowa? I don't know enough about the ins and outs of Iowa to to say that, but they could certainly cycle up every 2 or 3 years and be competitive. So that's just an aside. So a little Kentucky, Iowa flavor there from the national landscape, in my perspective.
Well,
I don't know. Do you have any
just to
thoughts on that?
respond to
Am I
that,
off base?
yeah, just to respond to that, I would say that I don't think there's any question historically, and I'm talking about recent history, last 20 to 50 years, not going back 100 years, that there's no question that Iowa's been a much better football brand and football program than Kentucky. But if we're talking about currently, if we're talking about the last 5 to 10 years, then they're definitely on par. I don't think anyone can definitively say that one is better than the other. If anything, maybe Iowa's a little bit better, but it's extremely close. And that's all because of Mark Stoops. Like you mentioned, you can't just look at Mark Stoops' record and see if he's doing a good job at Kentucky. You have to understand what Kentucky football has been, aside from a couple of years with Hal Mumme and Tim Couch. What Kentucky football has been going back to the mid to late 70s has been basically awful. And what Mark Stoops inherited was Vanderbilt. It's basically what he inherited. And he, through his ability to coach and develop players, through his ability to look for alternate recruiting routes, i.e. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and not just the Deep South, has taken a bulk of 3-star recruits every year, recruiting classes. Well, he's improved if you look at Kentucky recruiting prior to Mark Stoops, they would have recruiting classes that you would just think would be inconceivable in the SEC, like classes that ranked in the 60s and 70s. And he's brought it up to a level where they bring in top 25 classes. So that's a significant improvement. But then on top of that, he's coached up those top 25 and 30 classes to be even better teams than that. So, yeah, I think he's a tremendous coach. I think that overall, it would be difficult to rank him above or below Kirk Ferentz, but I do believe in the current Mark Stoops as being a better coach than the current Kirk Ferentz. I think that he would have made some decisions over the last few years that would have upgraded Iowa football significantly. And I don't know if I project them or would to be quite the power in the Big Ten that maybe you do because of USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. I think there are some brands that would be difficult to get past. But yes, I believe that he would be smart enough and skilled enough and not have the attachments that Kirk Ferentz has from a family standpoint to make the right moves to make Iowa a much better football team.
No lies detected there. And like I said, I'm not as intimately familiar with Iowa, and how they could actually recruit and what he could turn them into. I just know that he's a fine football coach. And if it worked out that way, that Iowa would have a respectable coach, moving forward if he were to go there. So those are my Big Ten thoughts for Iowa, the Hawkeyes out there. So one of the things that I wanted to call in about, and I'm sure you saw this because it got some run both on websites and on podcasts and things like that. And as we look to the 2023 season, you are always trying to figure out who's going to be the contender, both in each division. And this week, or well, I guess it was last week, ESPN posted their article, I forget how they titled the article, but the most impactful games or the games they're looking forward to in 2023. And one of the games that obviously jumped out to me was they listed Tennessee, Georgia as one of the biggest matchups in the 2023 season. So no doubt, obviously that's going to be a big game. And I think they even put in the headline, Tennessee will be out for blood in November. A bit of a revenge matchup against last year. And I thought that was pretty interesting given that I was working on, I'm producing a piece for this week about who I think is Georgia's top contender in the SEC East for this season. And no secret, I'm giving that away, that I think it's going to be the Tennessee Volunteers. And the other article that came out or fact that came out was the over-under that had been set for Tennessee's season. I believe that number was 8.5. And if you have any affinity for Tennessee, you're shaking your head and scoffing and can't believe that they would put it at 8.5. Everyone seems to expect 9-10 wins at least. And I don't know. I'm thinking about all those things as I put together my piece for this week. And I mean, I can see as I look at the schedule, do I expect them to win 9 or 10 games? Absolutely. And then have a shot, against Alabama and Georgia. Those are the two big games. So that would push that total higher. But I could see if things went completely sideways for Tennessee, how you could get to 8 wins and no more. If you call it their schedule and take a look at it there, you have Virginia, which is a neutral site game. They should handle Virginia. Austin Peay is not going to be a problem. They have to go on the road to Florida. Now, I'm not a big believer in Florida at this point. I think Florida's a bit of a mess. I think they have roster issues, and I'm not sold on their coaching staff. So I think Tennessee should win that football game. If Tennessee doesn't, then Katie bar the door, because that means that Tennessee has got bigger issues than any of us are assuming. That's just where I would come down on it, even though it's a road game. So let's just say, they're 2-0. Florida, let's assume they win that game. San Antonio, let's assume they win that game. Now, anyone in Tennessee land is going to swear up and down there's absolutely no way they lose to South Carolina. They would have said that last year too. Mm-hmm. They hang their hat on this whole revenge thing. There's something to be said for that, I'm sure. And South Carolina is going to be a different looking football team. But to just dismiss it out of hand, I don't know that I would go that far. But Tennessee's at home. Let's say they win that game. So we're up to 5. Now, Texas A&M, I think, is the enigma of the league because we know they have players. The question is, what's that coaching staff going to look like? How's that going to pan out? Is it going to be a disaster? Is it going to be a success? I'm not sure. Honestly, I have not even been able to nail down how I feel about them. One day I think, well, maybe they step up and get someone like LSU this year, like they did last year in an unexpected fashion. And then other days I think they're just going to flame out and it's not going to be good for A&M this year. I don't know how I feel about that game. So I have to put a question mark beside that one. At Alabama, I do not believe that Tennessee goes on the road to beat Alabama this year. Alabama's too good. I don't have that much faith in Tennessee, to be quite honest. And I don't think they win that game. So that could be 2 losses there. Kentucky on the road. Your previous guest just made the argument about what everyone hopes Kentucky could be if you appreciate, Kentucky football. So if all those pieces come together, that game on the road is not going to be a toss-up or a layup for Tennessee. So the potential for a loss is there. Then they would come back to UConn. They would win that game on the road at Mizzou. Even though Mizzou may be making steps forward, I think Tennessee probably wins that game and probably pretty easily. Then Georgia comes to town in November, which is the game they were talking about. Now, recent history will tell you that Georgia does very, very well at Neyland. We've won 6 in a row in the series. We've won the last 3 in Neyland by an average score of something like 39-10 or 39-12. Every season's different, though, but there is a trend there. And if you look back to last season, it's obvious that Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, and Glenn Schumann are not just puzzled by this Tennessee offense. So there's no doubt that game is a tricky one for Georgia. But the thing I hang my hat on in that game is that Tennessee, and Kirby said this last year, Tennessee, everyone thinks about their offense as a passing offense, but in fact, they are a rushing offense. That's what allows the pass game to go. They run the ball well. They run it with intent. That's why the game played out the way it did in Athens last year. Georgia stoned the run game, which you can't, if you're a Tennessee fan, you shouldn't feel necessarily bad about that. No one's run the ball against Georgia in 5 seasons. And I don't expect that that's going to change in 23, given what's returning. So if you're looking ahead and just assuming chalk as far as personnel is concerned, then you just have to know that it's going to be tough for Tennessee to run the football at home, just like it was on the road. And I think that gives Georgia the edge in that game. So that's another loss. So, I mean, I counted off 4 potential losses there. And if things go sideways, Florida gets you to 5. I don't know. I just didn't take as much offense at the 8.5 over under on the Tennessee schedule as some people did. Now maybe I'm
they're
just
fans.
well, right. Well, maybe
They're
again, maybe
fans
I'm
coming
just
off a 10-win regular season that see their program ascending and without a hitch, without a bump in the road, and just continuing to take off. So 8.5 to them, they don't necessarily understand or appreciate what Vegas odds mean. They're not, they have to take all factors into consideration. So they see it as a slight that we were 10-2 last year. You're telling us we're going to be 8-4. Well, from a gambling perspective, all those things have to be taken into consideration. And yes, that's a fair number to draw the line between 8-4 and 9-3.
I thought it was fair. Again, rose-colored glasses, orange-colored glasses, whatever might taint your view there. Now, in fairness, if I am a Tennessee fan and I've put my chips in the center of the table with Heupel and believe he's going to make all the difference in the world, yeah, I might take umbrage with that also. But as someone who's not a fan, as you said, I don't think that's that big a deal. I think, should they win more than 8 games? I believe they should. But I'm not upset about it. And that's just one of the things that I'm going to look at this week as I put together my piece. And, it's there was some talk in the chat earlier about the West and who to look out for in the West. At first, for the last 2 months, I have thought I had been leaning toward LSU. Like, I think that's who I'm going to predict. I haven't made that prediction, but I think that's who I would go with as the favorite to win in the West this year. And in the last couple of weeks, I have found myself coming off of that position, not being quite so bullish and moving back toward Alabama as the favorite to win in the West this year, even with their quarterback questions. So I don't know. I'm sure I'll go back and forth a little bit more between now and the time we get to summer camp and all these preseason predictions get set in stone. But I think, the league's going to be interesting this year. As it is always, there's going to be plenty of matchups and surprises, but I think there's going to be a lot to look forward to in the conference this year. Obviously, referring to the chat again, because I'm in the chat so often here. We were talking the other night about what, like, as you look at the national scale, should Georgia be considered a favorite to win the championship in 2023? Now, Vegas, I believe at this point, has them listed as the favorite to win, but and there's good reason for that. I mean, if you look over the last 2 seasons, just to set the frame of reference here, Georgia's gone 29-1 over the last 2 years, and they've beaten every school during that run that has won the CFP title. So there's no reason to believe that they're not going to continue that sort of play.
That's an interesting note you just brought up there.
It is, and I had to double check it because I wanted to make sure I knew what year the CFP began,
Sure.
and it began
Ohio
with
State,
Ohio State, right?
Alabama,
And I'm like, right, because Florida State was the year before.
LSU, Clemson.
Yep. And it makes it quite impressive. If I were not a Bulldog fan, I would look at that and be like, yeah, that's pretty impressive. So, it's
It is. Yeah. In a 2-year span to beat everyone who's been a national champion in the last 9 seasons. Yep.
Right. I was talking with someone in my comment section just today, and they were citing how just how Georgia's schedule has been so weak. And I'm like, see, you're telling me right now that you are a casual fan. We don't have to go any further, because if you look at the 2022 season, when the season began, people looked at Georgia's schedule and said, okay, there's somewhere around 25 or 26 in strength of schedule. By the time the season ended, based on how teams played, Sagarin and TeamRankings.com both had Georgia as the number 1 toughest schedule in the country last season. And then you pair that with what I just mentioned to you about who they've had to beat over the last 2 years in claiming these championships. And then layer on the fact that they're the first major college football team in history to win back-to-back titles with any sort of playoff. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's an impressive thing that they've done. And you got to think that it's going to continue moving forward. So I don't know if Georgia should be the favorite, but they certainly should be considered. But as I've talked about in a lot of my own videos and in the chat and stuff, there are a lot of moving pieces in Athens this year. So they have work to do if they're going to do that again. But I just, the Tennessee, there's just been a lot of talk about Tennessee this week. And so I thought I would pull together some thoughts on it myself and share those with everybody. But Tennessee's, they're on their way up. And I've pointed this out to you before. I mean, I'm not banging on Josh Heupel. Okay. I think he's doing a fine job at Tennessee. Over the long haul, it will be interesting to me to see if Tennessee can recruit at the level necessary consistently to stay at the top of the SEC. And the reason I say that is just simply because of where they are located. And then you look at the schools around them and who they have to recruit against to get those players. Tennessee is not a state that produces 10 or 15 Division I players every year. They might produce 1 to 5 and top tier players. So if Clemson is good, they have to compete directly against them for players. Georgia, obviously, Alabama, obviously, Ohio State, obviously. So I don't know. We will see what Heupel can do. But I do know that when he left UCF, that program was not trending in the right direction. And that was at a much lower level, not much lower, but that was at a lower level of competition at the time. So I say the jury's still out on Heupel, but I also say that Tennessee fans should live it up and enjoy what they've got going because they are absolutely a threat in the division this year. And if you're a Tennessee fan, you would hope they're going to be a threat moving forward. I just say we'll have to wait and see.
So in regards to Georgia's schedule, I will say I'm trying to process their schedule off the top of my head versus a number 1 ranking. So
last year's schedule or this year's schedule?
Last year's schedule. So of course they played Auburn and Mississippi State out of the division. First of all, the division was as strong as it's been in a long, long time, and roughly as strong or maybe stronger than the Western Division, which obviously has been the better division for the bulk of the last 20 years. But the SEC East has seemingly caught it. I at one point had counted up the season series between the East and West, and I've lost track of that number in my head, but it's relatively close. I think the East actually beat the West more games, I believe. I'd have to go through that again. But anyway, so I always we know how good the Eastern Division was. Tennessee ascended to a top 5 to 8 team in the country. South Carolina turned out to be pretty damn good. And Kentucky's a quality team. And then other than that, the other teams, not so much. Auburn continues to underachieve. They're struggling, but that's a set division, out of division rivalry. And again, Mississippi State turned out to be a 9-game winner and what I thought to be a top 15 to 20 team in the country. So that's a strong non-division game that Georgia dominated, 45-19, I believe. Georgia obliterated a really good Oregon team, not an elite team, not one of the best teams in the country, but one of the top 12 to 15 teams in the country, and they wiped them off the face of the earth. Georgia Tech's a game that they have to play, that they need to play, and Georgia Tech was pretty bad, but not one of the worst teams in the country. They won 5 games. And then, of course, they played, I believe, maybe one other game of somewhat of note. Did they play like a UAB? Somebody like that out of conference? I don't remember. They played Kent State. I don't remember. Anyway, those games are fairly insignificant, but man, I find it hard to believe that was the best and toughest schedule in the country.
That was not a position that I was lauding until people challenged me on it. So I decided to go look it up. And again, there's an equation that these sites used to make that determination. I don't claim to know that equation exactly, but it's laid out on the websites. So if you go to teamrankings.com, you can find it. Sagarin also had it as their rankings. I think maybe 247 did like an image, for social media, that they list out all the favorite or all the top schedules. So that's out there, I think, if you went and looked for it. So again, that was not a position. I mean, even I wasn't out there saying that's the case. But again, there's some equation, and I can't quote that back to you now. So,
Sure.
but
Well,
that's
it's usually
one of
it's
those
usually
things.
some team in the SEC Western Division that has the toughest schedule. Whomever has to play all the heavyweights from the top of the division, plus has to play some difficult non-conference schedule. But again, the SEC West was down. Now, Rowan in the live chat says, "No, we had the toughest schedule," meaning Arkansas. Arkansas played, of course, everyone in the West: Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, etc. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. They played Mizzou, as they typically do, and then they played South Carolina in the East, and then they played a non-conference against Cincinnati and BYU, who were two decent teams, but nothing great there. So I think that's fairly comparable to Georgia's schedule. I'm not going to dissect it right this second, but
Well,
yeah,
it's one of those things where, if my memory serves, I believe those two rankings that I mentioned to you had Alabama at 2, and I don't remember if it was Ohio or Michigan State. I don't think it was both of them, but one of those two Big Ten powers was in the
probably
top
Michigan
5.
State.
Ohio State. Did I say Michigan State? I meant to say Ohio State.
You said Ohio State and Michigan State.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Ohio State and Michigan. One of those two powers in the Big Ten.
Certainly Michigan didn't. They played an awful non-conference schedule.
Okay, well then it was Ohio State. So there you go. Those teams were also in the top 5, and I didn't look much beyond that. So again, that's just putting it out there, right? So you can look it up and decide if it holds water or not. But
now, looking forward though to
what they
this
said.
season,
Yes.
now here's Georgia's schedule. So the knock against Georgia, of course, this year is they're not playing anyone outside the conference, and I don't understand how that happened, except of course Georgia Tech.
You don't understand how it happened? I thought
I don't know if somebody canceled a contract or what happened there.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well then let me help, because I thought, honestly, at this point I thought everyone was aware of what happened, but because I laid it out in a schedule preview, so I just thought it was ground already covered. But what had originally happened, or was originally on the schedule, was for the second week of the season, Georgia couldn't get back into one of the neutral site kickoff games because they had been in one the year prior, right, against Oregon. And they saw no value in trying to go out west and play in one of those, like in Dallas or whatever. So it didn't work out. Those games were already scheduled out anyway. So they couldn't get a neutral site game. What they did do is schedule a home and home with Oklahoma that was supposed to be on the road in the second week of the season, which would have been a big time out of conference matchup early in the year. Even though Oklahoma was down, that's still a marquee brand. And for the record, I think when they come to the conference, Oklahoma will do better than Texas over the long haul. But that's another discussion. But they had Oklahoma. Then the news shook out about Oklahoma and OU joining the league. The SEC nixed that game against Oklahoma. They didn't want them in the playing a game in the conference this season. Georgia was left in the lurch, and the only school available to get was Ball State for week 2. So that's how they wound up with such a weak schedule 1 and 2 before they opened conference play against Carolina at home in week 3. And UAB is a game that cycles on to Georgia's schedule every 6 years or so. I think they were here in 21 actually. So they're back pretty quick for that one. So that is what happened. They had a big game. They tried, but the league made them cancel that game.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I do remember that situation and hearing of that. All right, Randy, appreciate you being here, man.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. This is the best 2 hours on the network, friend.
I
Best 2
appreciate
hours
that.
on the network. All
All
right.
right, have a good one.
See ya.
It's our guy, Randy, Dan Beast Media. Check it out. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Jackson checking in. Look at this. Hey, man.
What's up, Mark? How's it going?
I'm doing well. What have you been up to?
Just same old, same old. Getting everything squared away.
What's on your mind?
Well, this is an SEC show, and I'm talking about the future SEC schedules.
Yep.
I wonder what it's going to look like. Because, I mean, they say they're going to do 3 permanent permanent opponents, right?
Yep.
Now, the ones we got to figure out are, well, a lot of them. Now, I don't really understand Alabama LSU being the game that has to be kept. Because, I mean, like, look, once Saban retires,
Yep.
I really don't see a lot of people talking about Alabama LSU all that much. Kind of
You
like,
think that has to do with Saban?
I don't know. But because, I mean, a lot of the games prior to Saban coaching at both schools, nobody really talked about it a whole lot. So, I mean, there was not a whole lot of people that were going, remember that 1982 game? Oh, remember that 1989 game? Not a whole lot of people. But like for Auburn, on the other hand, now we don't know who they're going to play besides Bama and Georgia. Some people say it's going to be LSU. Some people say it's going to be Vanderbilt. But I think it should be Florida because it's, Florida is the closest school in the well, Auburn's the closest SEC school to Florida, from what I've heard. And that is a pretty good game, Auburn, Florida. I wish they play each other annually.
So what I'm playing here, and we'll eventually get to it, is
Right.
what I lined up for everyone's 3 common opponents.
Right.
I will go on record, Jackson, of saying that I know that it helps in scheduling to have a very strict, regimented format, but
For sure.
you could also consider this. Does every team have the same number of rivals? Well, of course not. Some have one.
Right.
I mean, legitimate rivals. Like, to a certain extent, they all are rivals because they play in the same conference, but legitimate rivals. So they don't. So I would have no issue. So we both know that over the past, I don't know when the division format in the SEC started in 1992, but it was at some point later that they went to this schedule that they currently have where you have to play. You have a designated rival in the other division. Well, for Alabama and Tennessee and for LSU and Florida and certainly Georgia and Auburn, that's a legitimate rivalry. But the other ones are just placeholders. They don't mean anything. It's ridiculous to have Texas A&M and South Carolina playing every year.
Yeah, I don't know why that game is an annual game. I'm just kind of like
they would be the 2 teams that you would select as being the least connected in the conference, and they play every year.
Exactly.
And what makes that extra ridiculous is when you put that into the context of, and we know things are going to change, but if over 70 years, let's say, that they would play 70 times, and the other game rotates through everybody else. And so let's say Texas A&M and Georgia, they would only play 10 times. That's a completely ridiculous schedule. So why do you need to designate everyone to have a rival? So for me, you can build a model like we see right there, 366 is what is being discussed and probably will be it. And I don't think that that's an issue. I think that could be a really good schedule, but I would look at and of course, we're just spitballing this, and
Right.
like I put together this video and worked this out in like 45 minutes. We're talking about people that they're paid to do this. They got to get it right. They've got months and months and months and months and months and months and months to figure it out. So they should be able to do this much better than us. But
Right.
I have no issue with saying, okay, take Tennessee. How many true rivals do they have that they should play every year? Okay,
Right.
let's list those teams. Alabama, list those teams. And they're going to be different for every team. Mississippi State, who do they have? Ole Miss. That's it. Do they need
Yeah.
to play anybody else every year? No. So why not approach it that way?
Right. That's a splendid idea. I mean, or also we could also keep division. I mean, I wish the SEC could, but I know they're not going to. Just put Bama, Auburn in the East, take Missouri out of the East, put them in the West, Texas, Oklahoma in the West,
Yeah.
and everybody
Yeah.
can play each other.
I've made the same statement. Exactly. Not that I'm proposing it, but I've said, here's an option that's pretty easy.
Right. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Let's see. LSU Ole Miss, that has to stay, of course.
Yeah, so LSU, I think I put them with Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and somebody else. I don't remember.
I know that Arkansas, Texas A&M's a pretty good game. I know that I agree with that. Arkansas, Texas A&M is I wish LSU was on that because I mean that's a pretty good game, but
That is a good game. You're right. And I have no issue with any disagreements for sure, because there are other ways, there are some tough calls to make.
right.
And so I think what I put together makes sense across the board, but not that there aren't a few calls that could be made, like in Arkansas, LSU. If you talk to LSU people, they don't consider that a rivalry. But see, I got used to them playing every Friday, the Black Friday after Thanksgiving, and that being a big game and a big deal. And I love that game. There's really only going to be one of these as this goes through that's going to look really out of place, but it's because there was just one spot out of all that didn't work for me. And again, I'm not commissioned to look at this for 6 months like the people that are going to build these schedules,
Oh,
So
yeah. I like what you got set up for Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, and Mississippi State. Because
I don't think that Alabama and Mississippi State have to play. It might surprise some people, though, that those two campuses are closer than any two campuses in the entire conference. They're only like 50 minutes away.
Auburn, Ole Miss, but that's okay. Florida, LSU. Well, I remember Florida, LSU said they're cool with not playing each other annually, so there's that.
Yep.
But Florida, that's a must keep right there. Florida, South Carolina.
Well, I'm not saying that these are must keeps. I'm just saying this is the way I would build the schedule if I had to go with 3-6-6.
For sure. I love this one for Georgia. Because, I mean, Auburn, Florida, South Carolina. I mean, so many memorable games out of Georgia, South Carolina as well. Kentucky, Tennessee. Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, Kentucky, Tennessee's memorable. Ole Miss, Florida, Mississippi. Well, it's like you said, these aren't permanent and all, but
the only game that I think has to be played there is LSU and Ole Miss. And I have no issue again with LSU Arkansas. I think that's a really good game. But I talked to the Arkansas and LSU folks, and they don't seem to make a big deal about it.
What about the LSU Texas A&M game?
Yes. So I didn't have LSU and Texas A&M, did I? That's because I will have to get to Texas A&M. I just felt pretty strongly about Texas A&M and Texas. I guess Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas is what the route I went with Texas A&M. No, I went Mizzou. I went Texas A&M taking on Texas, Mizzou as an old Big 12 rival, and Arkansas.
Yeah, I'm not so sure Missouri and A&M really care all that much about each other. I mean, the only connection they got is they both left the Big 12 and joined the SEC at the same time. But that Missouri-Arkansas game's been pretty good.
Yeah, that's been something the SEC has thrown together since they broke up LSU and Arkansas on the last weekend of the season.
Oh, yeah. Texas, Oklahoma.
So there's the one that doesn't fit. Oklahoma, Vandy.
Yeah.
But they're I don't know that they're going to throw together a schedule where they're all going to fit. I just had one left over where I'm like, what am I going to do with Oklahoma and Vandy here? I put Vandy with Tennessee and Kentucky because I think those two should be played. And then after that, there was just an open spot where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with these two? And let's understand, Jackson, of course, that this isn't the end of the world. This scheduling, it's not like building the previous scheduling format where it was like a big deal and a big decision who you matched up in the other division, because everybody else, you weren't going to see them for 6 years. Under this model, you either play them every year or you play them every other year anyway. So it's not as critical that you get it right.
There we go. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm excited about the upcoming schedule, though.
Yeah.
So Vanderbilt, they're just kind of, well, what do we do with Vandy? Oklahoma.
Jason, thank you for the super sticker there. Appreciate that.
Oh, he's got Michigan, man. All right.
So yeah, that's my look at it. So it's a fun topic, and they're supposed to get this settled right around the time they go to their SEC meetings in Destin, Florida at the end of May.
Yeah, those are going to be pretty big. It's going to be fun. Although they say that several weeks ago, LSU's permanent opponents are announced, but not really sure yet.
You know what I found funny was that Brian Kelly came out and he talked tough. And on the surface, I respected what he had to say. But on the same time, once I thought about it, it was like, what else should he say? So he basically said the same thing he said when he got the LSU job. And he said, I came to LSU to play the best, to take on the best, to beat the best. And then he said the same thing a few weeks ago about the schedule, because it looks like they're going to be pinned with Alabama, Texas A&M, and maybe Auburn. I forget how they had it set, probably Ole Miss. Anyway, he said, well, I'm here to play the best. I want to play the best. I want to play the toughest teams and so forth. Well, I thought, that sounds good, but you're going to get the schedule you're given anyway. So you might as well talk tough, because what you say is not going to happen. You got a lot of power. I get it, but you don't have much impact on the schedule. So basically you're going to be given the schedule you're going to be given. So you might as well say, bring it on, bring it on.
Yeah, Brian Kelly can win big games in the regular season, but he needs to win the big games in the postseason and in New Year's Six.
You didn't think that Purdue win was a big one?
No, they're a disaster. They got to win Cotton Bowls, Sugar Bowls. That's what Brian Kelly's got to do. Then he can talk tough.
Yes, no New Year's Six wins for him.
Yeah, I mean, one big win against Alabama in the regular season does not mean you're automatically the king. Georgia showed you that, Brian Kelly.
But on the other hand, it was funny to hear Nick Saban's response to the scheduling.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, where he said, LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee, who comes up with these? I don't know who makes these decisions. And I'm thinking, you have the most obvious rivals. You have the most obvious choices for permanent opponents. Why do you question this in any way? You have a big rivalry with Tennessee. Everybody in the world knows that. You've got to play Auburn, of course.
Oh,
That's arguably the best rivalry in the country. And then you've got the LSU game. To your point, that one can be argued.
yeah. Because, not a whole lot of people can think about, oh, did you see that game in 1975?
But it has been one of the biggest TV draws in college football for the past 10 plus years.
Oh, for sure, man. For sure.
And they are teams in the SEC West that have been together for over 30 years now in the West. And before that, obviously, as SEC members for a long, long time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at least everybody can agree that nobody can really think of a reason to keep Auburn, Arkansas, for example.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
who's really going to remember that one?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it's somewhere between Alabama LSU, somewhere between being a rivalry that has to be played and just kind of like they're just in the same division. Like you mentioned, Auburn, Arkansas, that's a great example. They've just been in the same division for 30 years, but nobody really looks at that game as we got to continue this series. This has to be played.
For sure. But,
yeah, I'm curious to see when was the first time that Alabama and LSU actually played. Going to find that here in a minute.
Well, they first annually played each other in 1964. So there was that. That was when a whole lot of people couldn't afford color in those days.
So that's a good call. Good job, Jackson. So yeah, the first time that they played continuously in this series was 1964 and have played every year since. First time they ever played was 1902. And they played pretty consistently until sometime in the 30s. And then they did not play for about 15 years. And they've played pretty consistently since the 40s. But they did miss a few years there in the 50s. Yep. But 55-27 Bama.
Yeah.
Series lead.
Yeah, that's that's a big one right there. But the Bama Tennessee rivalry is one best to best, and I'm glad we're never going to see Alabama Auburn go through another 40 year without each other period like they did in 1907, 1947.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's not happening again. Just got to make sure Texas A&M don't do that as well.
Yeah.
Because you got to play each other. Especially
the SEC's taking care of that.
Oh, for sure. Only trouble is who's going to be that rivalry week opponent for Oklahoma. I mean, I'm still just kind of like, oh man, it's going to be tough figuring out.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to be able to come up with a perfect formula for all 16 teams on rivalry weekend.
Yeah. But that's going to get figured out in the spring meetings.
Yep.
So that is going to be big. But,
anything else, man?
Oh, man. I'm just amazed that Bama's doing well in basketball. I mean, it's just like, we're in Sweet 16. That's just so amazing.
Enjoy.
I mean, I'm hoping they make it to the Final Four, but I'm not gonna get my hopes up. I'm just gonna, because I do not want to see him get upset, because I don't want to be jinxing anybody. Because I think the other day on Twitter I jinxed West Virginia. I was tweeting about, Maryland's getting beat down by West Virginia, and then an hour or so later, bam, West Virginia gets beat.
You put the hex on them.
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling myself, don't run your mouth on Twitter, but I don't think I'm ever going to learn that lesson, am
I? All right, man. Well, I appreciate you stopping by, man.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right, Jackson. Have a good one.
Have an awesome SEC live show.
Thanks, man. Good to see you. All right. And we will just about wrap it up here at the Voice of College Football. We've been on for 2+ hours on our SEC show. We're here every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, the SEC live show, and catch our next show, which is Iowa Hawkeyes Live. That is coming up next on our Voice of College Football Network, Iowa Hawkeyes Live on the Iowa channel. Please join Corey Brada and myself at 5:30 Eastern. And then we talk Nebraska football live at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the Nebraska channel. So that's the lineup for today. Iowa at 5:30 Eastern, Nebraska at 7 Eastern. We will see you then.